In 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte was exiled to one of the most remote islands on the planet. A 2 weeks journey from the nearest continent, St. Helena was a high-security prison reinforced by thousands of miles of open ocean. The European powers had finally done away with Napoleon once and for all after his defeat at Waterloo, and even the French public turned their backs on their emperor. His final years were a period of profound isolation, surrounded by guards and servants, but thousands of miles from his lost empire and powerless to shape its destiny. With no more conquest to be won, Napoleon was left to contemplate his legacy. "I have no fear whatever about my fame. Posterity will do me justice. The truth will be known, and the good which I have done, with the faults which I have committed, will be compared." Napoleon lasted for 6 years on St. Helena. When he died, nobility as an ideal was finally gone in France. It didn't matter that Napoleon wasn't a hereditary monarch like the kings before him. The public turned on him just the same. The French Revolution and the Napoleonic era marked a dramatic shift in Western perceptions of leadership, as Napoleon's downfall symbolized the rejection of the noble ideal in favor of democratic principles. But as a revolutionary turned pseudo-monarch, Napoleon remains a controversial paradox who instilled revolutionary ideals in France while simultaneously contradicting them. A few years after decapitating King Louis XVI in the public square, how is it possible that the French people allowed Napoleon to ascend to the throne as emperor? Did he play by a different set of rules? Despite revolutionary ideals and democratic principles, the French public entrusted Napoleon with power because he offered them something in return, a destiny they could believe in again. The rise and fall of Napoleon is a story of a leader in the public, which could shed light on the role of modern leaders in an age of democracy and equality. Born 23 years after Napoleon's death, Friedrich Nietzsche thought extensively about the significance of his reign. The German philosopher predicted that the decline of belief in gods and kings would leave a void in mankind's soul. In turn, people would have to create new values to replace the old ones. In the French Revolution, the nation collectively embraced liberty and equality at the expense of nobility and hierarchy. Nietzsche would say that authentic values affirm the nature of reality. In nature, life is marked by struggle and inequality. A true slogan of justice, according to Nietzsche, would be equality to the equal, inequality to the unequal. The French monarchy was corrupted. They had come to represent decadence and greed rather than excellence. But the French revolutionaries conflated corruption with hierarchy itself. Instead of trying to reform it, they destroyed it altogether. How did Napoleon manage to rise from the ashes of such a political climate? Like a last signpost to the other path, Napoleon appeared. The most isolated and late-born man there has ever been, and in him the problem of the noble ideal as such made flesh. One might well ponder what kind of problem it is, writes Nietzsche. As an outsider turned emperor, Napoleon's rise was both a product of and a contradiction to revolutionary ideals. But his ultimate exile demonstrated that his noble image was irreconcilable with the spirit of the age. The French Revolution further undermined Napoleon's personal ethos by imposing a predetermined set of values onto individuals, exemplified by the motto, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Before the revolution, individuals were likewise forced to abide by a system of noble values. While so-called noble values may seem positive, they are subjective and therefore unenforceable. They are also unattainable by most because of their rigid hierarchical nature. In a post-revolutionary society, individuals may appear freer, yet they are still compelled to conform, not to a ruling minority, but to the majority. Nietzsche called this herd morality. With equality elevated as the highest ideal, the only real value is the lowest common denominator. Herd morality is important for maintaining the safety and the stability of the public, but if everyone was a part of the herd, no progress would be possible. To quote T.S. Eliot, Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. Napoleon was one of those individuals who risked it all, pushing the public's faith to the absolute limits and ultimately beyond. Napoleon embodies Nietzsche's archetype of the Ubermensch. Such people don't retreat to the refuge of herd morality because their relentless search for truth connects them with a higher, almost divine consciousness. With this special wisdom, they take on the responsibility of serving as a bridge between humanity and the gods. Nietzsche compared this bestowing of knowledge as a flash of lightning. Great men, he says, like great ages, are explosives in which an immense force has been piled up. Their prerequisite is always, historically and physiologically, that things have long been gathered up, piled up, saved, and preserved for them. That for a long time, no explosion has taken place. When the tension in the mass has grown too great, the most casual stimulus is enough to call genius, the deed, the great destiny into the world. What difference does environment make then, or the age, the spirit of the age, or public opinion? A flash of lightning is quick but illuminating, sometimes destructive, and often misunderstood or feared by the unenlightened. At times, not even Napoleon himself understood what he was doing. Destiny urges me to a goal of which I am ignorant. Until that goal is attained, I am invulnerable, unassailable. When destiny has accomplished her purpose in me, a fly may suffice to destroy me. Napoleon's relentless drive was more than mere ambition. It was a gravitation towards something transcendent, tied to the forces of world history and destiny. Looking back, it can be said that Napoleon's historical destiny was to restore stability to post-revolutionary France and to forge a new order. He accomplished this in 15 years before falling from grace and being exiled. Being an outsider wasn't new to him. Arriving in mainland France from Corsica as a boy, he was looked down upon as a foreigner. Unlike his elite classmates at military school, Napoleon came from relatively modest means. Nonetheless, he stood out because of his ambition and charisma. Given the egalitarian sentiments of the revolution, the rise of a figure like Napoleon might seem surprising, but to Nietzsche it made perfect sense. Because Napoleon was different, he writes, the heir of a stronger, older, more ancient civilization than the one which was then perishing in France. He became the master there. He was the only master. Great men are necessary. The age in which they appear is accidental. That they almost always become masters over their age is only because they are stronger, because they are older, because for a longer time much was gathered for them. Napoleon was a loyal servant of destiny, somehow both a product of and contradiction to his circumstances. The progress achieved during Napoleon's reign came at a great cost. But despite turmoil, Napoleon exhibited an extraordinary ability to compartmentalize his personal struggles and public responsibilities. For example, he divorced his true love Josephine when she failed to produce an heir, and later entered a political marriage with Marie Louise of Austria, the daughter of the Holy Roman Emperor. Napoleon even abandoned love in the pursuit of his destiny. The genius, in work and deed, is necessarily a squanderer. That he squanders himself, that is his greatness. The instinct of self-preservation is suspended, as it were. The overpowering pressure of outflowing forces forbids him any such care or caution. People call this self-sacrifice and praise his heroism, his indifference to his own well-being, his devotion to an idea, a great cause, a fatherland. Without exception, misunderstandings. He flows out, he overflows, he uses himself up. He does not spare himself, and this is a calamitous, involuntary fatality, no less than the rivers flooding the land, writes Nietzsche. The French public also had to make great sacrifices to realize Napoleon's visionary destiny for France. Napoleon's aggressive military campaigns involved the conscription and death of countless young men. The reforms and conflicts of the era caused upheavals which affected the lives of all the French people, whether they supported him or not. Despite this, France stood by Napoleon for the vision and glory he delivered during his explosive reign. Because much is owed to such explosives, Nietzsche writes, much has also been given to them in return. For example, a kind of higher morality. After all, that is the way of human gratitude. It misunderstands its benefactors. Napoleon's relationship with the French public was one that involved heavy sacrifice on both sides, united by a shared vision or destiny. Napoleon offered the French public tangible benefits that went far beyond vague notions of glory or destiny. In his early years, he was instrumental in bringing stability to a government that had been engulfed in chaos since the revolution began in 1789. The Reign of Terror had led to the imprisonment or execution of thousands deemed a threat to the revolutionary government, leaving the nation divided and paralyzed by fear. Meanwhile, France faced existential threats from their neighbors, as monarchies across Europe saw revolutionary France as a destabilizing force that could ignite similar uprisings in their own countries. After rising to prominence as a military prodigy, Napoleon orchestrated a bloodless coup in 1799, which elevated him to first consul, the sole leader of France. Most historians mark the coup de Brumaire as the end of the French Revolution. Napoleon took command of the chaos. "The people must not be counted upon," he once said. "They cry indifferently, 'Long live the king,' and 'Long live the conspirators.' A proper direction must be given to them, and proper instruments employed to effect it." Napoleon viewed himself as this instrument, which the public could employ to achieve its own destiny. Without the public on his side, he would have been just another tyrant hungry for power. But at its best, Napoleon's relationship with the French public was symbiotic. He provided France with stability and direction, while the public provided him with the legitimacy he needed to realize his vision. Napoleon sought to unify the French people by consolidating power and establishing a centralized state. Through the Napoleonic Code, he created a new legal system that replaced a sagging patchwork of ancient feudal laws. This reform incorporated many of the ideals of the revolution, including equality before the law, justice, and liberty from authority. "My real glory," Napoleon says, "is not to have won 40 battles. Waterloo will erase the memory of so many victories. What nothing will erase, what will live on forever, is my civil code." Napoleon's reforms stabilized the country and laid the foundations for modern France. His leadership delivered order and progress during one of the most uncertain and pivotal moments in the nation's history, making him an indispensable historical figure. Napoleon's influence affected not just France, but the entire world. His campaign spread revolutionary principles such as equality before the law, secular governance, and meritocratic institutions across the European continent. Modern-day Italy and Germany saw feudal structures dismantled, laying the groundwork for unification movements and modern states. The Napoleonic Wars indirectly set the stage for European unity, culminating nearly 200 years later in the formation of the European Union. "I wished to found a European system," Napoleon declared, "a European code of laws, a European judiciary. There would be but one people in Europe." Napoleon's vision and legacy influenced governance for generations and ultimately led to modern democracies. Democracy remains one of the most cherished institutions in the Western world, often revered with almost religious devotion. In theory, it places power in the hands of the people with universal suffrage and freedom of expression. In practice, however, this potential is constantly undermined by chaos and the dynamics of herd mentality. Social media, for example, while theoretically democratizing discourse, often descends into a cacophony of conflicting viewpoints, where the lowest common denominator comes out on top. Instead of uniting around a shared vision, the American public is splintering into competing narratives which conceptualize things in entirely different ways, consume different streams of information, and in some cases never intermingle with those that think differently whatsoever. Leaders aren't doing much to help the situation. Take Joe Biden as an example. The so-called leader of the free world is far from the archetype of the Platonic philosopher king or the Nietzschean Ubermensch that people look to for guidance. The most recent election showed, however, that when push comes to shove, the public often gravitates to leaders who at least project a confident vision of the future. But still, there remains a large segment of the public who are distrustful of elevating bold leaders, and with good reason. There are far too many examples of figures who have won the public's faith only to use it for their own personal gain. Through election cycles, politicians remain one of the least trusted and least liked professions. In its idealized and extreme form, the democratic ideal suggests that society can manage itself without placing power in the hands of corruptible leaders. Unfortunately, this ideal thus far has proved unattainable. The United States and most other countries have a head of state which is embodied by a single individual. Leaders remain a vital part of society, whether the public trusts them or not. The question is not whether we need leaders, but what kind of leaders the public needs. No leader, no matter how extraordinary, can ever save the public on their own. Even Napoleon didn't accomplish his destiny single-handedly. His arc was a dialogue with the French public, and ultimately they had to take the responsibility for being the masters of their own destiny. The next great leader will be the person who channels the energy of the people and transforms their will into reality, an individual who elevates the public as much as it elevates them. As the public invests their trust and power, this person will give back, making the public's destiny their own.